Hey, I don't know what happened. My video cut off. I was talking to myself for a while there. What I was saying was that yes, the years are the days are long, the years are short. Things do go by in the blink of an eye. You will look back and be like, how did this happen? How did it go so quickly? But right now, in the midst of sleep deprivation, it does not feel good. It is not enjoyable. You might say to this, you wouldn't say to somebody, oh, your broken knee, yeah, that sucks, but it won't last forever. Oh, your migraine headache, you should just enjoy it because it'll be gone tomorrow. Like, that's not helpful. Sleep deprivation is not enjoyable. It is dangerous for physical health as well as mental health. And if a parent is asking for help, they're not asking for a guilt trip. This is part of why we as parents so often suffer in silence, and we just assume that we must be screwing something up because everyone else makes it look so much easier. Because when we ask for help, so often it's met with shame and judgment and guilt, and that's the last thing that a parent needs. So if you don't have something really helpful to contribute to their dilemma, please just don't contribute. Don't tell them to enjoy it. You're not helping anybody. All right, number 7. This is the one you've all been waiting for. Babies who cry at night will become brain damaged, or they're going to have psychological trauma. Listen to me carefully. The studies don't show this. People who know how to actually read and interpret medical and clinical and research studies will tell you that there is not a shred of evidence that says babies who are left to cry for short periods of time for a few nights in a row will have brain damage, long-term lasting psychological effects, or become traumatized in any way. What has happened is there are studies that long-term effects of high stress situations, long periods of crying where a baby does not have a responsive caregiver can cause those things. But we're talking about babies left for days to cry. We're not talking about a baby who has a period of crying, even a long period of crying in the evenings or overnight or a couple of times a night, who's then buffered by a loving, responsive relationship in the morning. So if your baby cries at night, and then in the morning you go in and you give them hugs and kisses and you tell them good morning and you play and you engage and you bond throughout the day, your baby will not have psychological damage. That's not how it works. Loving relationships buffer those hormone changes. And we're talking about totally different types of stress than a little bit of crying for your baby to learn how to sleep independently. The other argument that falls under this one is, but their cortisol levels shoot through the roof and so damaging. Yes, crying does raise cortisol levels. Again, that returns to normal with loving, responsive care. And also, it's really important that babies have exposures to some levels of acute stress. It builds emotional resilience. I just can't emphasize enough. I am not talking about leaving your baby to cry for hours on end. I am not talking about walking away. In fact, we'll address that in a minute. But short periods of crying are not going to damage your baby. We are so afraid in our culture. We have this poisonous fear of crying and of emotions in general. And our infants and our babies and our toddlers need to learn that it is okay to have and feel and express those emotions. Because you know what raises cortisol really high, and you know what keeps it high in the short term, but also keeps it high in the long term, even with responses that are loving and with bonding opportunities? Sleep deprivation. Yeah. Inadequate sleep raises cortisol in the short term and the long term dramatically, much more so than the little bit that a baby will experience if they cry for a few minutes. It's that simple. Okay. But on the flip side of that, I promised we'd address this. The idea of just close the door and walk away. Not what I'm talking about here. That may be the right solution for some families in some situations. And if that's you, I don't judge you. Not at all. Sleep is important and you have to get it how you can get it. But that being said, the Just close the door, walk away, don't go back till morning, no matter what. Your baby vomits, oh well, let them sleep in their vomit. That is not good advice. That's terrible advice. You wouldn't use this method for teaching your child anything else, right? It makes no sense now to say, well, you're just going to have to suffer. There's a difference between struggling and suffering. And if your baby is suffering, that is also not appropriate. So yes, tears may or may not be, usually are, a part of learning to fall asleep independently and put yourself back to sleep between cycles and phases of sleep. But there is a process of responding to needs that's missing from most recommendations to use like a cry it out method. There's monitoring and assessing and data collection that needs to happen on a formal or informal basis. You know, as a sleep trainer, as a sleep expert, I do a lot of very formal note taking and data and research on your babies. But as a parent, you can do those things too, but you have to do it with fidelity, and you have to understand what you're doing, what you're watching for, what the signals are. Is your baby self-soothing? Are they signaling to you between sleep cycles because it's habit or because it's need? How do you know the difference? And so that's the process. When people say just leave your baby to cry it out, walk away, don't do anything, they're missing that process piece that's really important. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Number 9, don't let them nap during the day or keep them up later at night. Don't do it. Don't do it. It might be the worst sleep advice on here. The saying sleep begets sleep is true. It's a real thing. It's a complicated and complex dance of hormones that happens in your brain and your body. If you've tuned in before, you've heard me talk about melatonin. That is like the number one sleep hormone that anybody talks about when they're talking about sleep. But melatonin is only one piece of it. Melatonin is involved in setting your circadian rhythm, that, you know, roller coaster of wakefulness and sleep that happens in your body. But another really important hormone for sleep is called adenosine. And adenosine is kind of like your body's barometer. And so as it rises and creates more sleep pressure throughout the day, when that hormone is up and your melatonin or your circadian rhythm is down here, there's a high distance between your sleep pressure and your circadian rhythm. That's when your body is going to have an urge to sleep. But if your baby gets to this high sleep pressure state and has a need to sleep, and that need goes unmet, then their body says, okay, if I can't get sleep, what else can I do here? I'm going to shift my hormones to help me push through that wall. It's the same thing that happens to you at work. You know, if your 2 o'clock comes around and you're exhausted and, you know, you're finding your eyes feeling really heavy and you're like, I could die for a nap right now. Some of us medicate that with caffeine, but even if you don't do anything specific, your body will create what we call a second wind. And a second wind is just a shift of the chemicals and a shift of the hormones where your adrenaline and your cortisol pick back up, which again is why cortisol raises so high in terms of sleep deprivation. So it's not that keeping your baby up a long time will help them to fall asleep better or to stay asleep longer at night, because that sleep pressure raises and raises and raises and it has nowhere to go. So instead, we want your baby to nap well during the day. Most often, if you can get your baby napping better, then nighttime sleep will start to sort itself out a little bit too, or at least show improvement. So trying to decrease naps or eliminate naps or just push your baby to stay up later, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. It's actually going to do the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. So don't listen to that piece of advice. And number 10, we've reached the end. The last piece of really well-meaning but really bullshit advice that you get about your baby's sleep. You're a mom now. Your baby comes first, and no offense, but you sound kind of selfish. Nope. There's a reason that when you get on an airplane, they say, if you need to use the oxygen mask, please apply yours first before assisting your child or another passenger. You cannot help your child. You cannot be the best parent, the best caregiver, the most attached, the most bonded, any of those things that if you are sleep deprived. You can't. You are not as good with inadequate sleep as you are with adequate sleep. That's that's it. That's not arguable. um, and really, I think that the concept of it's okay if your baby wakes up 10 times a night because that must be what they need to the point where you're suffering. That's how codependent relationships begin, y'all. And I'm not like, that sounds harsh, but it's true. Your baby's needs need to be met. That's your job as a parent. But they should not come at the cost of your health as well. And sometimes, a lot of times, when we're talking about sleep, we're talking about a baby's habits or a baby's not yet learned skills as opposed to a baby's needs. We get them confused and we think if my baby is waking up frequently, that must be just what they need and I just have to suck it up and deal. And I want to really let you know that you don't, okay? Yes, our job is to take care of our babies, but our job is also to take care of ourselves. Setting boundaries for your parenting relationship is normal and healthy and good. It's our job to teach our children and to give them tools for success throughout their whole life, and teaching them how to sleep and the skills associated with sleep might be one of the best gifts you can ever give your child. You wouldn't let your toddler punch you in the face and be like, well, that must be what they needed. So you're awfully selfish to tell them to stop punching you. Like, that's not how parenting works. So if waking up multiple times a night is working for you and it's working for your baby, don't mess with it. I'm not here to say that everyone has to sleep train or everyone needs to do X, Y, and Z to get the same results. Different people operate different ways and different people approach parenting different ways, and that's totally cool. But 99% of the time, if there's sleep deprivation involved or frequent night wakings involved past the newborn stage, it's not really working for you and it's not really working for your baby. I think that we do a huge disservice when we don't meet the sleep needs of our baby. It's kind of like, it's like junk food. There's junk sleep too. And you wouldn't feed your kid cotton candy and potato chips all day long and then be like, oh, now you can't have dinner. Because we know, like, that's obvious that that's not healthy for them. What's less obvious is that not sleeping through the night and not getting good naps, it's not so obvious to us that that is also not healthy because no one teaches us these things. That's not a conversation that people have. Oh, you're expecting a baby? Let me tell you about really important sleep. And the reason we don't is because as adults, we get crap sleep. Nobody that I know, with the exception of very few people, are getting the amount of sleep and the depth of sleep that they truly need day to day. And so we take the lessons that we've learned and we pass them along because that's how humans work. And so really we need to change what those lessons are and change the messaging and the understanding of how critical sleep is. And I think if people understood how important sleep is for our babies, like putting ourselves aside for our babies, I think the conversations around teaching your baby to sleep would change drastically. So I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment with the worst, best meaning advice that you ever got about sleep. And let's tease them out a little bit. Let's talk about what are you hearing about sleep? What are people recommending to you? Is it good evidence-based information, or are you getting some advice that maybe doesn't really make sense once you dig in a little bit? Okay. As always, if you are ready to sleep through the night, if you have a baby, a toddler, or you just want to talk about your own sleep, reach out to us. You can go to phoenixfamilybirth.com, follow the link to sleep training, and then you can schedule a complimentary sleep assessment with us. And we would love to help you and your whole family sleep through the night and sleep well, because it is that important. Until then, wishing you sweet dreams and happy slumber. Talk to you soon.